Growing up, I usually find myself in a position I wasn't a part of in my earlier years with the Sonic series. Part of this is because my earlier years were much easier to explain rather than my current position on YouTube. My surroundings were supportive of the Sonic world that was so minimum and less historic than it is now. That and the series itself, a serious nature was to be founded upon us, the consumers and the developers themselves. Now the main demographic of Sonic has been tossed around for years, starting out as a Super Mario rival. E for everyone. It's easy to think that the series has been this way forever, but we look at Sonic's earlier cartoon shows, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Underground. They seemed very respectable towards the younger demographic. That does not exclude teens and adults, but there is no doubt, am I right? So we experience a root of efforts to engage this everyone audience that the world should be so accustomed to believe, and for what? No real reason, other than the fact that Sonic is a series about a blue hedgehog that runs through loops. With Sonic being the not Mario video games, you get a lot of not kiddie things. What am I talking about? Sonic CD's really weird imagery, the ancient morals on Angel Island, and so on. Sonic was definitely a series for not just young kids, but literally anyone who had the knowledge to piece together certain aspects of media and art tradition. That's constantly a reason this franchise is so appealing, and has been since the 90s. Fast forward to much darker tones, and you see even more apparent examples with Sonic Adventure. You experience death, excessive greed, and somewhat sacrifice. All this did was expand on what Sonic was working for with his audience, bringing a new light onto their eyes that wasn't experimented with at the time. Jump to SA2, where you get an even darker situation. A mad scientist decides to destroy Earth by colliding it with the space ark. Holy crap, we are getting in some deep stuff. But then again, this is just building off of elements we've seen in the past. Death, the machinery, it's not just the gameplay itself, it's how an audience can react to a particular change in pace. These games were made to appeal to everyone that was familiar with common media tactics, not just video game tactics. Relating this to media such as the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers could make sense, because you had a set of teenagers fighting evil against dangerous monsters and machinery. The show is commonly cited as a kid's program, but there is no doubt that there are some elements that only teenagers and adults could understand. Cryptic enough for kids, but not completely impossible for them to understand. Sonic has been this way forever. A video game franchise that takes itself serious, whether it's in an atmospheric way or just an overall experience. When you jump to a game like Sonic Colors, you definitely get a lighter tone and atmosphere compared to, say, Sonic Adventure 2. This was most likely to branch away from 06's reception and remind the gaming audience that Sonic can still be lighthearted. The game itself proved something, but in some ways it appealed to something that wasn't particularly looked at by Sonic fans. I could go on record and say that Sonic Colors had the most different story in the 3D lineup during that time. And while appealing to an audience you think is core, it's really not, because I look at nearly every game afterwards and can't help but think that the core audience that Sega's looking for isn't exactly what you'd expect from a franchise that has suffered for years. It was in this awkward state where they felt they had no choice but to please Sonic's old fans with tons of nostalgia, but at the same time release lighthearted storylines that didn't follow or build off of any sort of structure from the ones in the past. This is further highlighted with the Sonic Boom franchise in that it was blatantly marketed towards children. Or was it? Sonic Boom tends to hold such themes such as dinner parties and house decorations, things that don't appeal to kids at all. So what does this all mean? Pretty much that Sonic's target audience should be in fact everyone, but over time has dissolved into a messy situation, to where fans of the past generations that still want to see new Sonic content won't see any kind of follow-up to the environment that they were left to keep expecting, and that may either be good or bad to some, but it definitely doesn't excuse the case of that actually happening. The non-gameplay elements of these games determine a lot with this franchise, more than you think, and when it comes down to Sonic's target audience, I like to think that they don't pay attention to this stuff because it should come natural, right?